And it brought back memories of my time as a driver around Monte Carlo.
30 seconds, the man is dancing on the main straight with the 30-second board. Now we will have a green flag lap or a formation lap. Well, John, the green flag lap of this year's Monaco Grand Prix, the 52nd, and I don't know whether the camera will pick it up, but there is a lot of people here in Monaco, and I would even think there is more people here today than last year.
Well, I hope they're going to see a classic jewel around the streets of this principality. And certainly Mika Häkkinen throughout the weekend has been ebullient. Michael Schumacher, of course, has displayed an air of confidence. He knows right now the rhythm of the season has gone very much in his favour. His time at Benetton really now beginning to generate the results and the potential that always lay within the Benetton team. And of course, Schumacher undoubtedly a world champion in the making.
There's going to be an empty space on the grid somewhere because Pedro Lamy, his car did not start, or did not start quick enough, maybe we should say. So Pedro will have to start at the back of the grid in last position. So the slot he was going to occupy in 21st position will now be empty.
Well, Schumacher looks to be doing a reasonably good job in slowing down this parade lap, but you can see the problem that we were talking about, cars weaving from side to side. That's specifically to ensure the temperature in the tyre stays as high as possible. Well, in fact, just the gap has opened up again, and I'm surprised. It really is important to spend as little time on the grid as possible. As we see JJ Leto way down the grid on 19th place, and obviously disappointment from him in his what effectively is home Grand Prix.
Mika Häkkinen slowly getting onto the grid, and Michael Schumacher already in his pole position slot.
Yes, he got there. I thought he was controlling it nicely as they came out of the chicane, and he seems to have spurted that little bit ahead. You can see now the midfield all taking up positions on the grid, and every second seems like a minute when you're sitting in pole position.
Michael Schumacher and Mika Häkkinen. A short sprint into Saint-Devote, and then it's up the hill towards the Café de Paris in the casino. We see the red light on the top left of our corner. It'll go on any second now. We see the green flag, and there's the light. And who's got the best start? It's Schumacher, and Damon Hill's got a very good start indeed. Damon Hill, oh, and that touch. Damon has touched Mika, and whoa, what a start. And that is very disappointing. And is Hill retired? Oh, someone else there.
Yes, we can't quite make out, but certainly Mika Häkkinen disappointingly out within 300 meters of the start. He got tipped from behind by Damon Hill. Damon then limped his way up the hill, and in the meantime a further chain reaction behind, but Michael Schumacher took advantage of his pole position and has just sprinted away.
And then it's the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, Christian Fittipaldi, but look what happened.
Well, contact left rear right front, classic into Saint-Devote. It is always difficult. Mika Häkkinen had sufficient ground. Damon really ought not to have been quite so aggressive into the corner on that first lap, and Michael Schumacher exiting chicane for the first time down into Tabac, clearly and comfortably in the lead.
Whoa, what a turn up for the books is that. Mika Häkkinen out, Damon Hill going round very slowly, and well, that's it. Oh, that's the steering arm, that's gone.
Well, so that is something that in reality, after all the incidents we have seen over the past fortnight, should not have happened. I know that starts of Grand Prix are always tense moments, but really to be involved in an incident, particularly when you're so near to the front of the grid as that, ought not to have happened. Damon should have been more prudent. He had a flyer of a start. You can't win the Grand Prix in the first corner.
Schumacher, Berger, Alesi, Christian Fittipaldi. Yellow flags being waved for Damon Hills, Williams, Renault. And then it's Martin Brundle, Mark Blundell and Ukio Katayama in 7th. Michele Alboreto 8th, Eric Gomez 9th, and Andrea de Cesaris is 10th. And there we see the top 6 on our screen. And, well, who'd have thought that after one lap?
Well, it certainly was something we did not expect or hope to see. And in that first opening lap, Michael Schumacher came through 3.7 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger in second place, and Berger a further 2.5 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi in third.
Also a flyer of a start from Johnny Herbert in 11th position. And there's only 20 cars that have passed the start-finish, so we've lost actually another 2, John.
Well, I think in that first corner shunt there was at Tyrrell, we think was Mark Blundell or no, Katayama, Blundell and Katayama 6th and 7th.
Well, Michael Schumacher extending his gap over Gerhard Berger to 3.7 seconds. Then it's Jean Alesi, Christian Fittipaldi. Top 7 stays the same, but Michael Schumacher again, a very good opening couple of laps. And, well, who's going to stop him this afternoon here in Monaco? This man maybe, John?
Well, I think there are 75 laps remaining, and that's a lot of motor racing. We've seen in previous Grand Prix at Monte Carlo, in fact in 1988, Ayrton Senna, he absolutely dominated the Grand Prix. Then midpoint through the Grand Prix, suddenly, and well, we lost picture momentarily from Berger's onboard camera, but back to the land-based cameras. It is concentration, and if you allow yourself to relax just momentarily, one of those curbs or a little tip on the barrier, that can be the end of your Grand Prix.
Well, John, and let's not forget last year when Michael Schumacher was leading very comfortable and his engine let go.
Well, Schumacher under no pressure whatsoever, able to pace himself. He can drive, he's got a clear road there. You can see the gap, 5.7 seconds as they completed the third lap. And really all Schumacher will do is use the clear road ahead of him. He can use the part of the circuit he likes to build up as quickly as possible. Certainly the kind of gap he would like to see, that when he does choose to make a stop for tyres and fuel, he may well be in a position to return to the circuit still in the lead.
Alesi 10 seconds behind leader Michael Schumacher, and then it's Christian Fittipaldi, who's only 0.9 of a second behind that second Ferrari. Then it's Martin Brundle in 5th and Mark Blundell in 6th. But the gap between Schumacher and Berger, 5.7 seconds. And there is Gerhard, driving as hard as he can in the Ferrari.
Well, I mean, we can see here on our Tag Heuer computer that Michael Schumacher's lapping over a second a lap quicker. And Berger, of course, regardless of whatever the strategy, is going to have to carry more fuel than Michael Schumacher. Ferrari's V12 engine needs more fuel. So the advantage at every level right now falls to Benetton Ford. 7.4 seconds at the end of the fourth lap. He's just, in fact, Schumacher's just returned a lap, 1 minute 22.570, almost 2 seconds faster than Berger's lap.
And that's a new lap record, John. Fastest lap last year, 23.6 by Alain Prost. So 22.5, a full second, 1.1 second faster.
Well, I think the speed Schumacher's able to run at this stage clearly indicates that this is going to be a two-stop race for the Benetton team. They would be unlikely with something like 80 or 90 litres of fuel, which is what they would need to have if they were doing a one-stop Grand Prix. But the problem, of course, again remains, whatever you choose to do, the problem is overtaking. And it is not always as easy or made as easy as it should be.
Well, we are riding with Jean Alesi. We're going for a break here on Eurosport. Please rejoin us after that for more action from Monaco.
Christian Fittipaldi, who is only 23 years old. He is the nephew of Emerson Fittipaldi, and he is really pushing Jean Alesi, and that is Martin Brundle behind. So it may be relatively static in the front with Schumacher leading Berger, but this is the battle for third, and it's the Ferrari of Alesi leading the footwork of Fittipaldi. That is the McLaren of Martin Brundle, and Brundle has closed up on Fittipaldi in front of him, and he's just ahead of Mark Blundell. So third, fourth, fifth, sixth, very close to each other. Into the right-hander at the Mirabeau, down to the hairpin at Lowe's corner. And Christian Fittipaldi in the footwork Ford has got an exceptionally suitable car, in fact more so than the V12 Ferrari of Jean Alesi for Monaco, because it is light, it is manoeuvrable, and the traction problems that the Ferrari have been having all through practice will be affecting Jean Alesi in the race. And I suspect that Fittipaldi and Brundle just behind are going to try and wear the Sicilian down.
Fittipaldi pushing Alesi very hard indeed. This is tremendous driving from Fittipaldi. We've seen some good stuff from him in the past. Head canted over to one side there, and a bit of a characteristic of Alesi. But don't be fooled by the fact that Brundle seems to be a significant distance behind and not pushing Fittipaldi. And one of the styles of driving here that...
Welcome back here on Eurosport. Well, we're back as we left you with Jean Alesi fighting off Christian Fittipaldi, who's half a second behind, and then it's Martin Brundle, another 1.2 seconds behind that battle. And there his very disappointed teammate, Mika Häkkinen.
Well, for Christian Fittipaldi, following Jean Alesi, this is a little education in the art of self-defense, because Alesi is not a person to be half-hearted with. And Christian Fittipaldi, still relatively inexperienced, and if he wants to fight for Alesi's third place, he's going to have to be a little bit, let's say, forceful in his actions.
But it's early days yet, John. We're on lap 7 out of 78. So there's a very long way to go in this Monaco Grand Prix. I suppose we can expect pit stops roughly just after the 20-lap mark for the people that want to stop twice, John.
I would expect to see stops somewhere around laps middle 20s. Interesting, Fittipaldi through the swimming pool complex closes up on Jean Alesi, but the horsepower Ferrari have, and it is rumoured to be in excess of 800 horsepower, just opens up the gap, and this is one of the parts of the circuit where it happens.
Gerhard Berger now 11.7 seconds behind leader Michael Schumacher, and Schumacher a second a lap faster than Gerhard. Now, John, it might be a big gap at the moment, but if Ferrari decides to go on one stop, for instance, and Benetton's decided to go on 2 stops, then the gap isn't that big at all.
It's going to be a never-moving game. Benetton will be looking and analysing at Ferrari, what they're doing. They will not know the strategy, but they've probably got a pretty good idea. For Schumacher, it's important before his first pit stop to have at least 20 seconds. Remember, it is a slow entry now with the chicane at pit entry, an 80-kilometre speed limit in the pit lane, no more 120 or 30 mile an hour exits. There's a small chicane at the exit itself. It's going to take quite a lot longer, so in a sense it's a little bit of an unknown gamble if people will go for the 2-stop race. We're just going to have to wait.
Riding with Martin Brundle, the remaining McLaren in the race. Well, Gerhard Berger fastest to pits, and Schumacher another fastest lap. A 1:21.6, and this lap he's been 2 seconds a lap quicker than Gerhard Berger.
Well, that's a merciless pace from Michael Schumacher. 13.5 seconds in 8 laps. Really is sending out a very clear message indeed. But reflecting back to the first corner Saint-Devoux on the opening lap, what a great shame that we saw the collision of Damon Hill with Mika Hakkinen. Damon, great start from the second row of the grid, but of course it is no use if you drive into a car that is just ahead of you.
We are riding with Olivier Beretta, who's following Rubens Barrichello, Johnny Herbert and teammate Eric Comas, and what a shot it is.
Well, this is the onboard camera, the front-mounted camera on Olivier Beretta's car, and we're getting really, I think, the most realistic onboard shots we've ever seen from Formula One. And this is as representative as you can get. I mean, that is the view that you have through the narrow slot, that full face helmet, the peripheral vision, of course, quite restricted. Coming through the tunnel, the cars tend to separate a little bit, and Barrichello back end steps out under braking. But it's through the tunnel where the car loses downforce. You don't and you can't get too close. So any opportunity you think you might be able to make under braking into that chicane, you've got to be courageous and very good on the brakes to take advantage.
Right behind Olivier Beretta is JJ Leto, Schumacher's teammate. And, well, I think actually Comas is maybe holding him up a little bit, John.
Well, it's a little battle that's been going on, and of course Comas, in fact, doing a very good job in defence. He's not there to say, well, Johnny, I think you're quicker than me, off you go. And that is fundamentally the character of this Monte Carlo circuit. In the meantime, Michael Schumacher, for the first time, slower on a lap than Gerhard Berger.
Maybe he's trying to pace himself now, John. 13 seconds is the gap. And the gap now, well, just over 13 seconds, 13.6 when Gerhard passed. So maybe he's just trying to pace himself to whatever Berger is doing.
Well, I would think in this condition, with a clear track ahead of him, he ought to try and get as much ground between himself and Berger. Going back to this mandatory 80-kilometer speed limit, we asked Mika Hakkinen this morning, how can you judge 80 kilometers per hour? Well, they've got a pre-programmed indication on the onboard readout, so something will come up on the screen, I'm sure, for Schumacher as well. But 80 kilometers per hour after a pit stop, when you're keen to get off the circuit, is very hard.
Schumacher passed the swimming pool, and I must say the Monaco director, please go. Can we go back to that Comas, Herbert, Barrichello, Beretta fight and JJ Leto, because that was a very good fight indeed.
Well, there are the pretty shots of the port of Monte Carlo. And Martin Brundle still in 5th place and just over 1.5 seconds in arrears to Christian Fittipaldi. Michael Schumacher coming up to lap, and Bertrand Gachot uses his mirrors well, stays over to the left. And really, this is a circuit above all others where cooperation from your opponents really is important, because the day that you don't do it, somebody will pay you back.
Michael Schumacher braking for the chicane, going into the harbour. Michael, another Monaco resident, going through to back. His last lap was at 22.440, and let's just see what he's doing right at this moment. There's the man that's chasing him, Gerhard Berger. Nearly the whole harbour behind, actually.
A long way, and of course it's a rather depressing sight for the rest of the field to see Michael Schumacher just gallop away at an unbridled pace. Well, I hadn't anticipated, let's say, the showing from Ferrari that we have seen. They've certainly made significant improvements, not just to the horsepower of their engine. They're finding more balance, more grip. If you go back to the Grand Prix, the second Grand Prix of the year, the Pacific Grand Prix in Japan, we saw Ferrari in all sorts of problems in the low-speed corners. Well, certainly John Barnard and everyone at the Ferrari Development Centre just outside Guildford in England and back at Ferrari base in Maranello have worked extremely hard to make the front and the back of the car work as a car. Now that's seeming a very fundamental observation, but it often is one of the most difficult things to do.
Gerhard Berger exiting the tunnel where the speed is roughly 270 kilometers an hour, and the gap between him and Michael Schumacher at this moment 14.3 seconds, and we're on lap 13, or actually Schumacher's just starting lap 14.
And just interesting, look, I got up my maximum speeds at the end of the qualifying session on Saturday, and just an indication of how powerful these Ferrari engines are presently. Berger and Alesi, Berger 283 kilometers before the chicane, Alesi 279. The next quickest, third quickest man, Michael Schumacher, only 271 kilometers per hour. That Ferrari has got a lot of grunt.
Michael Schumacher and Gerhard Berger, the gap is again grown to 15.3 seconds. Then it's Jean Alesi, Christian Fittipaldi, Martin Brundle and Mark Blundell. That's the top six here in Monaco. We're on lap 14 out of 78, and we will rejoin this race after the break, live here on Eurosport.
Wing. On the other hand, Mika did move slightly across to the left, and this track, as we said before, does funnel. So Damon would have found himself very late, very suddenly, with nowhere to go, would be squeezing, and that would have been a mitigating circumstance in that incident. But here's that battle there. There is Martin Brundle following Fittipaldi closely. Now, we may see Brundle close up towards the middle stages of the race, and if we do, there could be a very good reason, and that's because for the first time this year, McLaren are running power steering. They are joining the Williams team in running a power-assisted steering, and you may wonder why, with cars weighing just 500 kilos, you could possibly need it. And the reason is, of course, that the cars, with all these massive amounts of wing that you can see so clearly just then, weigh effectively about 2 tons when they're driving at speed. And trying to drive a car that weighs 2 tons with these still very wide tyres and small steering wheels means that the steering is actually very, very heavy indeed. So with power assistance, the driver's effort is reduced, and he will fatigue less, and that should help him in the later stages of the race. Let's wait and see.
24 drivers started this race, 20 are left. 3 of them have been lapped, Lamy, Gasho and Belmondo, who are respectively 18th, 19th and 20th. As Martin Brundle in 5th position pursues Christian Fittipaldi's footwork forward. He can see it going into the Mirabeau, the right-hander. The time difference between them is about 1.9 seconds. Looks closer to than that to me at the present moment. Mark Blundell holding on well in 6th position in the...
Welcome back. We're on lap 15 of the Monaco Grand Prix. And the gap between Michael Schumacher and Gerhard Berger currently 16.2 seconds. Now, interestingly, the gap between Christian Fittipaldi and Martin Brundle has always been around 1.8 seconds. But Christian is losing out on Jean Alesi. Alesi now running identical times, although, well, thank you very much, Jean, but basically identical times to Gerhard Berger. He's some 13 seconds behind Berger, but then he's now nearly 4 seconds ahead of Christian Fittipaldi.
Well, 6th place man Mark Blundell having a rather lonely little run. Mark 4.5 seconds behind former teammate Martin Brundle, but long way ahead of teammate Ukio Katayama. Well, the battle going on with Barrichello, Beretta and Leto, and Beretta, and look, smoke, wheel spin from the back of Barrichello's car, and Beretta looking all around the streets of Monaco to find a way to get past.
It's a very good opportunity to show that camera on the front of Beretta's car. JJ Leto, up the hill, that car is quick.
Well, not only that, I think Beretta, being a little bit optimistic, he's making the car very wide indeed. Leto, of course, a lot more horsepower from the Ford Z-Tech-R engine over the Ford HB in the back of Beretta's LaRousse. And Rubens Barrichello himself in 12th place. Got his eyes focused on Johnny Herbert ahead of him, but that's a 3-second gap to try and run down.
Leto running in a 1:27-second record, but then I think he would be able to run faster if he gets past Beretta and Barrichello, and we're riding with Beretta and now again with JJ Leto. Disappointed face there?
I would think yes, a lot of disappointment, and it's really been a very tough weekend for Damon, and having to shoulder the entire responsibility of the Williams-Renault team this weekend. It was a rare mistake from Damon Hill. It's cost him extremely dearly.
Barrichello getting away from Olivier Beretta at the moment. Barrichello 25.2, Beretta 26.3, so that gap suddenly 1.4 seconds. And behind Leto we can see Michael Schumacher already lapping Oliver Panis in 15th position, and we're only on lap 18. 60 to go.
Well, it's not going to be very long before Michael Schumacher has got his teammate in his sights, and I wouldn't expect to be too much difficulty getting past JJ Leto, but of course Beretta and Barrichello engrossed in this battle presently for 12th place, and this is where Schumacher really must be very careful. On the other hand, he can take full advantage and allow Gerhard Berger to be the one that gets bogged down, but the momentum that Schumacher has built up, he's now on his 18th lap, he will want to maintain. You see already Schumacher right onto the tail of JJ Leto, so I would expect to see Leto somewhere here allowing, yes indeed, hand up on the go through Michael. Good use of the mirrors. In reality, Leto will not lose out very much because he can follow now through with Michael Schumacher, and he is going to hope that when Schumacher gets to the tail of Olivier Beretta, he's close enough to go through as well.
Also Rubens Barrichello probably lapping one of the Pacific cars, and very definitely in traffic at the moment, Michael Schumacher. The gap between him and Gerhard Berger, 15.2 seconds, and look at this.
Well, this is a moment of tension because you got Paul Belmondo staying as far over to the left as he can, Barrichello, Beretta diving down the inside, Schumacher now into a line of cars, and Beretta may not recognize that the Benetton close to him is Michael Schumacher, but there will be blue flags, or there ought to be blue flags being waved at Beretta to signal that it is the race leader Michael Schumacher now behind you, not JJ Leto.
Well, coming into the chicane, Schumacher still behind the LaRousse Ford of Olivier Beretta, and I got a feeling he's not really realizing it, although maybe somewhere Michael will get past.
Well, I cannot see that many blue flags around the circuit indicating to Beretta that there is the lead car right on your gearbox.
Bet you they haven't told Beretta it's got orange on the front, and then it's Schumacher.
Well, this is very frustrating now, a blue flag, but it's only held out statically, it was not waved, and I think there should have been a lot more vigor from the marshal at that particular point and all around the circuit. I mean, it is possible Beretta who's focusing ahead of himself. Out of his peripheral vision, he will see the Benetton, the familiar shape and colours. He's not recognising it as Michael Schumacher.
Going down to, oh yeah, he's defending it.
Well, that is poor marshalling, in my opinion, from the Monaco marshals. They should be waving, they should be almost on the track. Beretta unable to, or failing to, accept it is Michael Schumacher directly behind him, and it is this moment that for Schumacher he will not wish to have for very much longer. Coming up alongside into the chicane, now alongside Beretta. Finally, oh my goodness, sorry Michael, I didn't know it was you, honest.
Well, Schumacher passed, and now Beretta defending again for JJ Leto.
Well, that's what Leto was hoping, but Beretta instantly blocked Leto. And this is not something that I'm very happy to see. What we've gone through over the last fortnight, I would prefer to see a little. There's a flag finally is being shown. Now this time to Rubens Barrichello. He pulls over to the left. No problem for Schumacher. That is good, intelligent driving.
Schumacher's lap there, a 1:25.4. And let's see what the gap is with Gerhard Berger at this moment. Berger's last lap, Berger's 20th lap. What's supposed to come up on the screen soon? Oh, 26.5. So you've been held up more, John.
Well, they're getting into the meat of the traffic. And again, fine work from Johnny Herbert, letting race leader Schumacher through cleanly. Now Eric Comas.
Well, he's always been easy to overtake.
Well, something like that. But Gerhard Berger, of course, getting into the two Ligiers. That's the reason why he's dropped off. And the balance of time between race leader and second place Berger more or less static. Eric Comas sensibly lifted off a little earlier coming into Tabac. Schumacher got the message, got through cleanly, and now track ahead of Comas, relatively clear. Okiya Katayama, the man in 9th place, he is some 9 seconds or so in the head.
Race leader Michael Schumacher, starting lap 21, had a 13.7 second lead on the previous lap. Then it's Jean Alesi, Christian Fittipaldi in 4th, Martin Brundle 5th, and Mark Blundell in 6th position. That's the top 6. We're on lap 21 out of 78, and we're going to take a short break here on Eurosport. Please join us after that.
May not be holding him up that much, but as I've said, if you get very close to these cars you lose performance, so it may be that McLaren have decided that it's best to bring Brundle in, change his wheels and change his tyres and fuel, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Now let's see how long this stop takes. No problems, 8 seconds. You'll notice that it was tyres and away. That's a very slow. Oh, no, I'd forgotten. 50 miles an hour limit in the pit for the first time. And some of the cars, the Williams of Damon Hill, for instance, had a special device where the driver pressed a button as he came into the pit lane and it prevented him from doing more than 50 miles an hour. So Martin Brundle accelerates up the hill.
And what's critical is that Brundle has got out in front of Alboreto, and he should be able to keep him at bay now through Casino. Alboreto was in 7th place, so Brundle, having just lost 1 place to Blundell in the Tyrrell in that stop. So that looks to be a good move for McLaren and Brundle to have done. And now he can use his fresh tyres to good effect. He can charge harder, and he'll probably be on a little bit less fuel than he was before to try and close that gap. He's 15 seconds behind Blundell now, so we need to watch that gap close.
In 6th position, Schumacher, that you're looking at, leads on lap 20.
A couple of minutes ago, a pit stop from Martin Brundle. Now in 6th position behind former teammate Mark Blundell, just ahead of Michele Alboreto. So he only lost 1 position, John.
Indeed, but more importantly, that stop in total time was about 23 seconds, and that's what we've got to watch out for Michael Schumacher, who's only 15 seconds in front of Gerhard Berger. And of course now with Brundle being the first man to stop for fuel and tyres, he is undoubtedly into a 2-stop race. We wait to see what happens with Michael Schumacher. This is lap 23 he's on, and just about the time we would expect to see the lead Benetton come into pits.
Michael Schumacher going round Raskas, accelerating and going on to the straight. So starting lap 23. I hope for all the other competitors, John, he's not doing this pace and only stopped once.
Well, that would, I think, demoralise everybody even more. But the people like Flavio Briatore and Tom Walkinshaw in the pits masterminding the Benetton programme this year, you can be sure that strategy is going to be pretty impressive.
Now, with all respect to Michael leading that race, Gerhard Berger is in the middle of the back markers, and I don't know where he is at the moment on the circuit, but he's some 17 seconds now behind Michael Schumacher, who's got a clear road ahead of him and has taken full advantage of that. Jean Alesi some 16.6 seconds behind his teammate in third. Then it's Christian Fittipaldi, Mark Blundell and Martin Brundle. That's the top six, unchanged. Alboreto still seventh, and the Minardi team, I don't think they're very ready, trying to gear up for a pit stop. And the Jordan team is ready, John, for a pit stop. So expect Andrea De Cesaris or Rubens Barrichello in very shortly. Now I can't see the bender. Yes, he's coming in. Michael Schumacher is coming into the pits. Now let's see what that stop's going to be like.
Well, the stop itself, I'm sure, will be as good as we've seen all year. This is something they've practiced prior to the Brazil Grand Prix. But it's the total time, the entry and exit, and in fact, there ought not to be. Oh, and well, looked like he's almost stalling, but he's got out and into the pits.
It's Gerhard Berger. So Berger into the pits as well with the Ferrari, so he'll be having his two-stop race. But that stop is definitely quicker.
Well, just watch Berger. Normally he lights it up. Well, prudence now with this 80-kilometer speed limit, and it certainly is being observed at this point. Just drop the clutch and go. Well, Schumacher, in fact, lost more time than Martin Brundle did. We wait to see for Berger. Berger's time, in fact, 4 seconds on that pit stop. So maybe Michael Schumacher being more than just cautious, both on entry and on the exit. He did lose, to me, time from the point the car was back on its wheels. He seemed to hesitate or linger. I thought he might have stalled. He caught it and off he went.
But Michael Schumacher is leading. But Jean Alesi is now second. Alesi, who hasn't stopped yet. Christian Fittipaldi third. Gerhard Berger, he's made a stop. He's fourth. Then it's Mark Blundell and Martin Brundle in fifth and sixth. But remember, Martin stopped. Mark hasn't yet. And Martin just doing a 22.037. His fastest lap of the race. So those new tyres definitely working for him. Behind that, not a lot of change. Kelly Alboreto, Andrea De Cesaris, Ukio Katayama and Eric Comas rounding up the top 10. Then it's Johnny Herbert, Rubens Barrichello, Olivier Beretta still behind Barrichello. Then it's Leto who's still behind that. Panis, Bernard, Braverman Lamy and Gasho and Belmondo. So all 20 cars after that first lap shunt. Well, we saw Mika Hakkinen, Damon Hill, Pierluigi Martini and Gianni Morbidelli retire. We haven't seen any retirements as yet.
Well, at this point in the race, now 26th lap, Monaco is one of those circuits where you frequently get a lot of retirements in the early laps of the Grand Prix. David Brabham staying way over to the left, letting Jean Alesi through. And Alesi in second place, Christian Fittipaldi third, Gerhard Berger fourth. We wait to see what will happen. Alesi, of course, is one of those competitors in the past who's gone against the form book and has gone for maybe one pit stop. He may well have started, not here, but in other Grand Prix on a grade harder tyre. He seems to like the long odds, presently in second place. I do imagine, though, that Alesi will be very shortly coming into the pits.
Well, not on this lap. 22.304 for Michael Schumacher. And there is Jean Alesi crossing the line. And I imagine that'll be roughly about a 24. Yes, it is. So 2 seconds, the gap has grown. But Gerhard Berger in 4th position, only 14.6 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. And that's definitely less than at the beginning of this race.
Well, looking down the pit lane, Allard, difficult to see what's going on, but Benetton have got another set of tyres out, so that looks like JJ Leto is coming in for his first stop. But further down, looking to Ferrari, doesn't appear to be anything at all. So it may well be that Alesi has opted to go for a one-stop race. That would, of course, come somewhere around lap 40 to 45. And there is the Benetton pits, and it's this man that they're expecting in, maybe at the end of this lap, but certainly in the near future.
Could be the best thing he could do, I suppose, John.
Very often it is. You come back out in a different position. You can then run free and charge. You can pick up your own momentum. Right now, the problems that Leto has had throughout the weekend have been, he's not really been comfortable. He hasn't found his rhythm. He hasn't found the rhythm of the circuit. And a 5-6 car train like this, well, it's very, very difficult indeed. Eric Comas, not always the easiest man to overtake. And once again, the Monaco resident and citizen Olivier Beretta trying to sneak down the inside of Barrichello. He says no way this time.
Comas, Herbert, Barrichello, Beretta and Leto. That's the fight basically for 10th position. Sparks flying through the tunnel. And Comas still heading this group. Again, John, Eric Comas is running with sunglasses, by the way. We can see them.
Indeed you can, and he's got a different tint on this afternoon. Hopefully it matches his eyes. But he believes emphatically in these glasses. He's got different shades and tints for differing weather conditions, and he absolutely swears by the fact that they do improve his vision and the definition, particularly with contrast, and you get strong contrast on this street circuit in and out of the tunnel. And JJ's into the pit lane.
So JJ Leto on at the end of lap 28 into the pits. There goes the nozzle for the fuel, the tires, a fresh set of Goodyears, fresh L fuel, 8.2, that's quick.
It's a good stop, but I can tell you now JJ will make a second stop. He did not take on enough fuel at that stop to go the rest of the distance without refueling a second time. There's the exit chicane, you can see. Now ordinarily we've seen cars exit at very high speed indeed. Following Alboretto's accident in the pit lane in Imola, a mandatory speed limit has been introduced, and I must say, watching it here at Monaco, I'm very pleased indeed. The pit lane is undoubtedly a safer place with that introduction of a speed limit.
Schumacher in the meantime on lap 29. So basically, John, there's still 48.5 laps to go. And Gerhard Berger is closing in rapidly on Christian Fittipaldi. It's nice to give us the gap, but can we get the pictures, please? Because that was 1.3 seconds at the end of that lap, and Mark nearly missing the chicane. But Berger is some 2 seconds a lap quicker than Fittipaldi. Oh, busy time now.
Yes, Tyrrell and Jordan into the pits at the same time, and this is a little race. Not just only for position, but for the pride of who can put the fuel in quickest, who can get out. And this, a long pit stop, so I would expect that Katayama's got enough fuel in now to go for the rest of the race. Jordan, I'm sure, doing the same, but they're still in the pits. The car's still up, and it's Jack's.
Well, Katayama, John, as you can see, very slow stop, 2:10. And there we see Christian Fittipaldi and Gerhard Berger. That's the fight for third position.
And also, to me, Fittipaldi is on a one-stop adventure this afternoon. Gerhard Berger much quicker in a straight line than the footwork forward. But of course, finding the spot on the circuit to be able to use that additional horsepower may not always come his way. Just out of interest, Fittipaldi top speed into the chicane was 2.64. The Berger Ferrari 19 kilometers faster. So he's got the grunt, he's got the horsepower, he's just got to place himself to take full advantage.
Fittipaldi's lap a 1:24.2, Gerhard a 1:23.6, so that is again much faster than the Brazilian. Now, could be into Mirabeau, John, actually. That's a nice spot to overtake.
It's a difficult spot. You've got to be right on the back of the car as you come down into Mirabeau, and of course you can see Berger nowhere near close enough, but he knows where he's got his advantage. I think he might try this lap into the chicane. We're just going to have to wait and see.
Michael Schumacher leads Jean Alesi and Christian Fittipaldi, who is hunted down by Gerhard Berger here in Monaco.
I can really do some good, and it's going to be difficult here. Fittipaldi may keep him at bay, which is exactly what he needs to do. I mean, Fittipaldi wants to try and slow him up because Fittipaldi knows he's got his one stop coming up, and the more laps Fittipaldi can keep Berger behind him without resorting to any unpleasant driving tactics, the better.
So there's Fittipaldi, there's Berger, respectively third and fourth, coming through to complete their 30th lap. And Schumacher is now on his 31st lap, and he's 10 seconds ahead of Alesi, who is 4 seconds ahead of Fittipaldi, and you can see Fittipaldi in front. Now, Fittipaldi's got somebody in front of him. It's Parnis, Olivier Parnis in the Ligier, and if he doesn't make it easy for and he has done, he's made it easy for Fittipaldi to get through and Berger to get through. Parnis moves over, does not interfere with the battle between the footwork and the Ferrari.
We had a very good view of what we call marbles as the cars went up that circuit. These are little twitch there. Now that's exactly the consequences of Parnis driving on the marbles, by which we mean little chunks of rubber that get thrown off from the tyres, and they inevitably get swept off the main racing line. Now it may be that Parnis has either got a problem, I must admit, look, this looks a bit too much for even marbles, but by driving offline, courteously letting Fittipaldi and Berger go through, he will have picked up a load of rubbish essentially on his tyres, and it may take him a lap or two to get rid of that and get back to a normal pace. And Berger now, right, this is exciting stuff, right with Morbidelli.
Now, Berger's agony is soon going to be over, because I know that Christian Fittipaldi will be coming in 1 or 2 laps, not at the end.
Welcome back here on Eurosport. We're watching Christian Fittipaldi and Gerhard Berger fighting over third position. And John, do not forget, Christian Fittipaldi last year in the Minardi scored a point, 2 points to be exact, and he did that without a pit stop.
I can't imagine the Footwork Ford team going through without a pit stop, but then we've seen strange things happen before. Unfortunately, if the team would like to go through non-stop, they're probably, well, they are committed to whatever their strategy is going to be. And Fittipaldi, in fact, very interestingly, has reduced the gap to second place man Jean Alesi. It's now down to 3.9 seconds. What is happening in reality is that Gerhard Berger behind Fittipaldi is patting him on the backside and saying, get along, get along. The effect is he's closing down on Jean Alesi.
But Gerhard Berger now being closer than ever when they accelerate into the tunnel, and when they come out, can he be close enough to outbrake the Brazilian? I don't think so.
Very difficult, because you cannot get too close in that very tight curve. You can see Berger later on the brakes. He stays much more to the right hand side. Fittipaldi is doing an exceptionally good job under a lot of pressure.
We're on lap 33. Leader Michael Schumacher lapping in a 1:22.509 when he starts lap 34. The gap between him and Jean Alesi was 13.6 seconds, and on this lap it's a little more, I think. it is 15.3. There's the big bang, and the big bang's always from Gerhard Berger. Well, Fittipaldi's dictating his pace.
Well, second place man, and there is the Ferrari pit. We were expecting this as a stop for Alesi. There's Fittipaldi in third, Berger in fourth as the tail steps out over that bump. And Mark Blundell was in sixth place. And we watched to see what sort of job they do on Blundell. Katayama had a good stop. Of course, a lot more fuel going in. This is something like 80 litres of fuel in. This is the one that Mark, take it easy. There is a speed limit, but mind you, being so far up the pit lane, he's only got a little squirt before he gets to the chicane and onto the circuit.
Riding again with Gerhard Berger. And I am missing Rubens Barrichello, John. We saw him have a look in the pit lane where his car's gone, because we saw that very lengthy pit stop and the car is still in the pit. So Barrichello out of the race. So only 19 drivers in the race so far. There's Jean Alesi opening up the visor, getting the car in neutral, and also Christian Fittipaldi in the pits. So Gerhard Berger back into second place, but now 23 seconds behind Michael Schumacher.
Well, I'm not sure about Alesi. That stop, in my view, wasn't sufficiently long to get all the fuel in. And Fittipaldi leaves directly behind Jean Alesi, so it's Schumacher, Berger, Martin Brundle now third, Alesi fourth, Fittipaldi fifth.
1:53 the lap and the stop for Alesi, and 1:50 the lap and the stop for Christian Fittipaldi. So that's about right. They were 4 seconds behind or between each other, and now 1.1.
Well, possibly the 3 second difference in time is due to the extra fuel that the Ferrari engine would need.
There we see David Brabham in the Simtek, currently in 14th position. And Alesi staying well on the right side when Brabham was passing them. Behind the top six, with Michele Alboreto now in 6th position, and the top six going across your screen. There's actually not a lot happening, John. Gomez, Herbert, Panis, Leto, Beretta's dropped down, but he's made a pit stop.
Well, this is coming up to the mid part of the race, and we're seeing the true strategy, the choice that people have made. And there's a very interested observer taking it easy in one of the many yachts bobbing away in the harbour this weekend.
Michael Schumacher now a 1:21.0, so he's really getting the knife between his teeth and extending the gap between himself and Gerhard Berger.
Well, just looking across from the commentary position, we see Rubens Barrichello out of the car now, talking to Gary Anderson. And we don't know what the problem that led to Barrichello stopping. And team boss Eddie Jordan, he's looking down the pit lane to see when 6th place man Andrea de Cesaris is liable to come in to make a pit stop.
John, it's Andrea's 199th Grand Prix. We already mentioned that. He's never won one, and I think there's a very good chance that this will be his last ever Grand Prix. And I was talking to Ian Phillips this morning, a commercial director of the Jordan team, and he said, I would really, really love Andrea to score some points and have a good bye-bye.
Well, looking at Eric Bernard, and he's made a bit of a mess of it at the chicane. Lost it under braking on the approach, engine stalled, out of the car. Here we see it, the classic rear end lock-up, too late on the brakes, or sometimes what happens, your brakes get a bit hot, a bit tired, you push harder and harder, and then the car just goes into that little pendulum spin, stalls the engine. Teammate Panis leaps from the pit lane into the outside lane, and technically that is part of the racetrack.
The gap between Gerhard Berger and Michael Schumacher is still 28 seconds. And there's Andrea de Cesaris into the pits. And the one behind is Mark Blundell, who's now passed him. So Andrea back into 7th position, out of the pit lane and onto the circuit in 7th place. And that was 150.2, and there's a new Ligier airplane.
Indeed, a surreal view of a Ligier. It's been craned to safety behind the barriers. Very important on a street track. There's no natural parking spaces, so cranes literally lift the car the minute the driver is out. The safety of the racetrack. In fact, those two cars you see, Morbidelli's and Pierluigi Martini's, Minardi, they can't get a crane to that part of the circuit. It is actually, in fact, on the other side of Saint-Deveau, and its jib, regrettably, is not long enough to reach across.
On lap 38, so 50 laps to go. We're not even halfway yet in this Grand Prix here in Monaco, with still 19 cars running, and there's a young man who isn't one of them, Rubens Barrichello. I think he'll try and get back to the paddock. We're still both Pacifics in the race, John, although 2 and 3 laps behind at the moment. But David Brabham in 12th position now in the Simtek Ford. Now David, John, looking at the times, I think might go for a one-stop race, to be honest.
Would appear to be the case, and David really doing an outstanding job here this weekend for the Simtek Ford team. And for David and the Simtek team, the best approach is, I think, the most straightforward. One stop being the ideal, and this is really a run just to give the team a building block to the future.
Johnny Herbert into the pits. There we see Johnny throwing something away. Would that be drinks bottle or something?
I think he may have been wiping his visor, but occasionally drinks bottles or bits and pieces drivers carry in their car. They do sometimes put a chamois under their thigh in case, when you're running in very close traffic, you do get spillage of liquids from the car ahead of you. So when you come in for that pit stop, you've got something in your hand to quickly wipe clear the visor. And one of the common aspects of somewhere like Monaco, you go through your tear-offs. Now there is a moment, a yellow flag out, there is smoke. Well, that's it. Okiya Katayama has pulled off. At the point of the circuit, you see Morbidelli and Martini's two cars. They, of course, involved in the first corner shunt, but we just saw the residue of blue smoke, the flag out, and David Brabham in for his sole stop. So Okiya Katayama's Grand Prix in Monaco ends on lap 40. And now a bit of a traffic jam, in fact, on the right-hand side approach into Saint-Deveau. Fortunately, that part of the circuit is well off the approach line. But nonetheless, I would like to see those three cars, where possible, being removed.
In 3rd place at the moment, 9.5 seconds behind Gerhard Berger, is Martin Brundle. This is race leader Michael Schumacher. He is on lap 40, 38 to go. And Gerhard Berger is 28.2 seconds behind. Now there's the Ford telemetry, and that's always an interesting thing to follow. It's interesting, that's first gear, John, in that very tight chicane.
It does show first gear. Certainly Rascasse will be first gear. And the little sprint up then to the tight right-left onto start-finish straight. I think that obviously the gear change and what we're seeing on screen is a slight delay. But just it's the rate of acceleration, 100 kilometers per hour, 100 to, I mean, it's just unbelievable. Almost 260 kilometers per hour, 160 miles an hour as you come up to the top before you go into Casino Square. And one of the areas, in fact, that is under discussion is a way to reduce engine horsepower. One of the new proposals that are going to be discussed tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. There's a meeting of the team engineers, designers and team principals with Max Mosley and the FIA to look jointly at the proposals that were issued or laid down on Friday afternoon, and in fact to put them into much greater detail. But I think for sure when we come to Barcelona in 2 weeks' time, a lot of the aerodynamic aids around the front wing will be gone.
Yeah, we see Eric Comas in the pits, John, and there's a problem, I think, with the clutch.
I don't know what he's doing. He's indicating that it's not my fault, I'm not doing anything. Well, certainly confusion, and there again a major blow up. And oil and water, and Michael Schumacher almost, and Mark Blundell, 2 Tyrrell Yamahas out in the space of 2 laps, and that at the same part of the circuit. We don't know what happened to Katayama's car, but Blundell certainly had a major moment. That engine let go in a serious way. Michael Schumacher, next car up, onto virgin oil and water, and nearly had contact to the barrier.
Comas out again.
And a jack that was lodged in the back of Comas's car as he went out was thrown across the pit lane and almost caught some of the team personnel on the Jordan team.
Well, they're actually all standing in the pit garage at the moment, John, and that's, I think, a very wise decision. Well, we are watching Martin Brundle, who's caught up with Gerhard Berger. Berger must be in this problem because...
Trouble anyway, Martin. I'm not going to make a big deal of it. Martin Brundle now second, Gerhard Berger limping in third.
Martin Brundle in the McLaren with the Peugeot engine. And this circuit's always been full of surprises, John. Now, can Paul Martin Brundle that surprise off?
Well, Martin has a lot of ground to make up. Michael Schumacher leading, Martin Brundle second, Berger third, Alesi fourth. As we see the second of the Lotus, Pedro Lamy, and again paper wiping off. Now, most drivers would start with at least 2 tear-offs on their visor, but when you're running in such close company as some of the people in the midfield have been doing, you're taking off the tear-offs very quickly. You've only got one shot when you come into the pits. You need something there at hand to wipe the oil and water, sometimes even loose fuel.
John, Gerhard Berger's lap was 10 seconds slower than what he's usually doing. Now, could it be that Gerhard actually spun on the oil left by Mark Blundell, sorry.
Well, I think that's a very strong possibility. And Berger did catch that oil, of course. The barriers are there saying welcome. So Berger undoubtedly had a problem, and we're waiting to see, in fact, if he can make it through, or he's going to have to slow down into the pits.
So Michael Schumacher leads Martin Brundle by over 30 seconds. Then it's Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, Christian Fittipaldi and Andrea de Cesaris in 6th.
85 miles an hour here, right again, still in third gear, left, now up to 120. That's Bertrand Gachot in the Pacific.
Yes, those close shots of Brundle were all very nice, but I would love to have seen where Berger was. Here, this looks like Berger here, and it is indeed. He's dropped a long way back. I find that hard to believe that is just from oil. If he doesn't come into the pits though, and he's not coming into the pits, then it must have just been that. But it does seem to be a long way back that Berger's dropped. Let's hope he can try and come back and close that gap. I'm sure at this stage, as we contemplate Martin Brundle in second place, it is now, don't forget, that he'll be appreciating the power steering and the advantages that it allows on his McLaren. This circuit is the most demanding of all circuits, with its nearly 40 gear changes per lap. In the old days of mechanical gear levers that, just like a normal road car that we all drive, every driver would end up with a blistered hand, just from the sheer number of gear changes. If you work it out, nearly 80 laps, 35 gear changes, well over around about 3,000 gear changes. But now, of course, that's not involved, because gear selection is taking place by electric switches behind the wheel.
Those are the McLaren mechanics. Are they waiting? Yes, they must be waiting for Martin Brundle. This is Brundle. Schumacher has smashed the lap record by half a second. That's an enormous amount. He's just gone round in 1 minute 21 seconds, which is half a second, 6/10 of a second faster than Nigel Mansell's previous lap record. Now, are we going into the pits with Martin Brundle at the end of this lap? No, we're not. Now, I say you can look at the precision, see how close the wheel...
The McLaren team is waiting for second place man, Martin Brundle. Welcome back here on Eurosport. Brundle is just over 30 seconds behind race leader and former teammate Michael Schumacher, lapping half a second quicker. That won't be enough. Michael has got to run into some sort of problem for Martin to win his first Grand Prix.
Well, we've had a quick glimpse into the McLaren pits, and they are out on pit lane. Their tyres are in place. The tyre covers are still on. This is lap 45. And we would expect, if that's the case, Martin will be popping in for his second and final stop in the next 2 or so laps.
Running with Gerhard Berger, who's now lapping in the mid 124 second bracket, and this is Jean Alesi incidentally, but Gerhard's dropped the pace and Schumacher is speeding up again, a 121.886. And there's Christian Fittipaldi right behind Alesi.
Well, there are the Ferrari team in preparation, and this may well be the opportunity Gerhard Berger will take. Well, not this lap. Berger 5.6 seconds behind Martin Brundle. Crossing the line now, it's going to be 5.8.
Yeah, Martin 23.2 and Gerhard 23.4. Traffic will play a major part in this Grand Prix, and we have 15 guys still running.
Cooperation. We did see Beretta being particularly bad when Michael Schumacher was behind him. I suspect Beretta didn't recognize the difference between Schumacher's car and Lehto's car. But I do think also that the marshalling, the flag marshalling around the circuit was a little bit lax. They should have been on the case a lot quicker. And Martin Brundle in the pits for his second stop.
Now Martin's only just under 6 seconds in front of Gerhard Berger, so we'll lose second place. And let's see how long this pit stop will take. Brundle 10.1 second, 80 kilometers an hour going into the pits and out of the pits, of course. And when he crosses the line, what was the total lap time for Martin Brundle? 1:48, that's not bad. Just being passed by Bertrand Gachot, but I suppose he'll get that back. Well, by the time we get to Maribor, probably.
But in fact, Martin really would like not to have had to overtake Bertrand Gachot in spite of, I'm sure, a lot of cooperation. It just takes away a couple of seconds. Well, Martin sliding down very easily indeed. Bertrand stays over to the left, and he's done a very good job so far throughout the race of keeping out of the way of the lead cars. He's, I think, just very happy to be in a Grand Prix and running at this point.
Jean Alesi is in 4th position, and well, still seeing who are we waiting for there, Gerhard Berger or Jean Alesi. It'll be not this lap. Schumacher lapping in the 1 minute 23 seconds. Gerhard Berger now some 40 seconds behind. Martin Brundle 59 seconds behind. Jean Alesi and Christian Fittipaldi still fighting over 4th position, and Andrea de Cesaris on his way to Jordan points here in Monaco.
Well, the Ferrari engineers waiting patiently. We watch Alesi up the hill. And all the way back down to Michele Albretto and Gerhard Berger. Berger, of course, second place, 40.4 seconds in arrears. And it looks really like more of a consolidatory drive now from Gerhard, as Michael Schumacher has well and truly stamped his authority, as he's done throughout the weekend on this Grand Prix de Monaco.
Well, not Gerhard coming in this lap. John, I mean, every time he changes gear right in front of us, and there's a big bang. And there's a big bang on the steering wheel there.
Well, a little bit of frustration, hand out of the cockpit, looking for the attention. I think that was David Brabham, in fact. And that's one of those moments where your rhythm does get broken. You expect and you look for cooperation, particularly from a car that is, at this point, 2 laps down. It isn't always possible to be as cooperative as you would like, as Jean Alesi now makes his way to the Ferrari pits, and a new nose being prepared. Well, has there been contact? And look at that, over one of the air guns.
So maybe that's why he was having his fist up in the air, John, that he ran in the back of David Brabham. David Brabham also in the pits, Christian Fittipaldi in the pits. And the computer still says that Barrichello's in the pits. Well, he definitely is.
In a moment like this for Jean Alesi, it must be so tempting to follow the habit of a Grand Prix lifetime, and that is to nail it all the way down the pit lane. Well, David Brabham, his Grand Prix finished for this year as he steps out, and there Benetton themselves preparing. And Christian Fittipaldi, well, a great drive indeed from Christian Fittipaldi, and another driver this year who seems to have found maturity along with speed. He drove very hard under pressure, and he pushed equally hard.
Well, the good old Italian boys are doing fine, John. Michele Alboreto and Jean Alesi and Andrea De Cesaris. Alesi, of course, being French but driving for Ferrari, but De Cesaris now in 4th position.
And we believe it's going to be a one-stop stop for De Cesaris and the Jordan team.
Race leader Michael Schumacher in the pits. Very good stop. He did not stall the engine. Well done, Michael.
Well, there was signals from the marshals on the left side of the track. I don't know quite what that was about, and it looked as if Schumacher almost came to a walking pace. And the pit stop from Benetton, and Schumacher looked almost serene sitting in the car, calm and composed, completely in control.
And the gap now, of course, down to 12 seconds, but Michael Schumacher has made his last stop. 28 laps to go.
And Olivier Panis just momentarily unlapping himself, and that's not going to last very long as Michael Schumacher puts the lap back on again.
There's Andrea De Cesaris in 4th position at 25.707 the lap time, but a very good performance so far from Andrea, John. And I must say, Andrea still has got speed and a lot of experience.
I think its experience really is paying dividends this weekend. But De Cesaris currently in 4th place, and I would think probably fairly happy with himself. The only problem I feel that Andrea suffered from this weekend is that I think at the start of the session on Thursday tried to maybe move too fast, too quickly. And it's so easy on a street track, which is completely different in terms of its personality and character to a regular racetrack. Gerhard Berger now back into the pits.
Ferrari pit stop. John, also the pit stop's been less frantic, I suppose, because of the time it takes, 8.3 seconds, to put in the fuel, so they don't have to throw around the tyres as much as they used to.
It's not just quite so desperate as it looked, but it is the fuel flow that is the determining factor. So a team is allowed maybe an extra second, at worst 2 seconds, and that's when you're doing that job like a minute. So it ensures that, I was going to say, the wheel goes on correctly, and regrettably that wasn't the case for Michele Alboreto in Imola. But there really now is little pressure on the mechanics that are on the wheel change, and in fact it's almost possible now for a safety retaining pin to be inserted after the air gun has gone back off. There's sufficient time in my mind, and it's possibly something that may also be considered a mandatory requirement for the future.
Pedro Lamy coming into the pits. Lamy in 12th position, and again we see Johnny Herbert creeping towards the top 6 in 8th, and behind JJ Leto. 40.1 second stop for Pedro Lamy. I'm sure he'll be traveling well below 80 kilometers an hour. He doesn't want to have another $5,000 fine or stop-and-go penalty for that matter in the race.
I think you'd rather take the stop-go penalty than the fine.
While Michael Schumacher leads the Monaco Grand Prix, he's 31 seconds ahead of Martin Brundle. We're going to take a break and be back soon.
Michael Schumacher that you're looking at now is in his 42nd Grand Prix, a clear half minute ahead of Martin Brundle, with 25 laps still to go between him and his 4th Grand Prix in 4 races of 1994.
Looking at the telemetry from Schumacher, that means the signals coming from the engine. The top blue line is the engine revs, maximum 15,000 at the far right-hand end, and you can see it's mainly up towards that end. Underneath it, accelerator, as you'd imagine, you can see around this circuit, much more time is spent with the accelerator relatively off. Now clearly on full throttle, it accelerates up the main start-finish straight. The gears is encircled, coming right down very quickly indeed. But watch him accelerate up the hill without any change to that accelerator. He's making those gear changes with the throttle flat down.
So who's in, who's out? Damon Hill has retired. Both the Tyrrells of Katayama and Blundell are out. Both the Tyrrells are still running. Mika Häkkinen has retired. Martin Brundle, of course, is in 2nd place. Christian Fittipaldi has retired, and so has his teammate Gianni Morbidelli. Both Lamy and Johnny Herbert are still running in respectively 12th and 8th positions. Rubens Barrichello has retired. In comes Leto into the pits.
Pit stop for JJ Leto. Welcome back here on Eurosport. Oh, that's a good stop.
Yes, slick work again from the Benetton team, 8.2 seconds. The long cruise down pit lane and back onto the circuit.
And JJ Leto 1:49.0 for that stop and the lap. That's not bad. So JJ now on his own, while Michael Schumacher is about to complete lap 54. And then we've got 24 laps to go in this 52nd Monaco Grand Prix. Michael still lapping in a very low 1 minute 22 second bracket, and Martin Brundle a long way behind, and this man is a very long way behind. It's Paul Belmondo. Some 6 laps in total.
Well, this is a really devastating performance from Benetton Ford and Michael Schumacher. While everybody else are running in the mid to high 1 minute 24s, he's just dropped in very casually and unnoticed a 1:22.3. And I think this is a different way of illustrating domination.
Michael going past the harbour yet again. Well, John, 13 cars still running, or actually 14 if we include Paul Bamondo, who is 6 laps behind. Christian Fittipaldi, David Brabham, Mark Blundell, the latest retirements. But the hardest part of the race is yet to come, I think, John.
Well, the only problem that I can foresee for Michael Schumacher is just relaxing too much. I mean, he's in a lovely rhythm. He's got no reason to go any quicker. But it's just a fraction of a second of lapse in concentration. Maybe something, you look down in the cockpit, you get distracted. And it is very easy indeed on an unyielding street track. Around the circuit, some of the curbs are chamfered, as we see. Others, in fact, are 90 degrees. And once again, Olivier Beretta. This time, hopefully, he does recognize the car behind him is the race leader. There's no need to race. He stays over to the right. Schumacher gets through cleanly, and, well, a better effort indeed from Beretta.
I think we can say then it was a genuine mistake, John, earlier on.
I think it was a mistake, certainly, though I have to say, in my experience, it's very difficult to make a mistake like that. And a driver ought to be able to recognize, certainly the identification on the front of Schumacher's car is pretty clear. And a driver should make himself aware of those differences between the two cars in one team.
There we see the gap between Andrea de Cesaris in 4th and Jean Alesi in 5th. 2.8 seconds at the moment. Well, John, Benetton's never won before in Monaco. Also, this Grand Prix is never before won by a German driver. And,
well, Mark Blundell being told what to do by Derek Warwick. Derek here in the guise of a pit commentator. But he is, I tell you, very anxious indeed to get himself back into a racing car. He said, this is not my long-term career. I'm only doing it just for a bit of fun at the weekend.
So Gerhard Berger in 3rd. 7.5 seconds now behind Martin Brundle. And well, it's all a bit of a status quo at the moment. And there's another television station grabbing Mark. So Mark, why did you retire? Well, John, we could see that. I think that engine was well and truly blown up.
And of course it would happen in the corner that Mark almost rechristened Blundell rather than Saint-Devoux, because he did have a few escapades throughout Thursday and Saturday. As he said to us just before the start of the race, he's checking out the line, checking out the braking zone.
Monaco, never won by a German driver, never won by Benetton. Although Austrian drivers won here before. Niki Lauda, of course, won here, and Jochen Rindt won this Grand Prix.
And that, I remember that Grand Prix in 1970. It was one of the most exciting, as Jochen Rindt drove a truly inspired Grand Prix, and he chased Jack Brabham right down almost to the last corner, forced Jack Brabham into an unforced error. And Bertrand Gachot, his Grand Prix over, he makes his way back, and well, undoubtedly he'll get the same attention. That's up in Casino Square. Well, drop into the hotel or the Café de Paris. On your way back, Bertrand, no one's going to say a word about it.
So 12 runners left so far. Michael Schumacher heading him 37 seconds ahead of Martin Brundle. Then it's Berger and de Cesaris. Andrea in a very good 4th position. Jean Alesi and Michele Alboreto completing the top 6.
Well, Alesi in 5th, trying to run down Andrea de Cesaris in 4th. And in fact, an interesting scene across the booth as we look into the Jordan pits. And in fact, it's the commercial director, Ian Phillips, who's on the pit board. I think he might have a new job for the weekend. And very important championship points for the Jordan team at stake. 3 points for that 4th place. And those are points that they would dearly love. Andrea, of course, he may well be in a points bonus this weekend. So 3 points at whatever factor he negotiated with Jordan will be a fairly handsome payday.
Well, when Michael Schumacher crosses the line, there are 19 laps to go in this Monaco Grand Prix. He laps in the 1:24 seconds at the moment. Martin Brundle's faster, but basically, Martin, time's running out.
Well, one wonders what would have been the situation had Mika Häkkinen not been bumped out at the first corner on the first lap. Martin Brundle had a much more difficult job starting further down the grid. But he hasn't given up. There's his pit board. And as he came on to start, finish straight, he certainly wasn't shy of getting his right foot buried in the throttle. That's the Virage Anthony Nodges.
Michele Alboreto running in 6th position. Well, Michele and the Minardi team, I think it's Barcelona, John, when they new cars coming out and they have a full 1994 car, which is then, I suppose, half a 1995 car as well.
The only reservation I have is that the meeting that is going to be held here on Monday morning may well mean that the new car that Minardi were hoping to introduce may well have to be a revised new car, because some of the changes that are being suggested certainly are in the area of the front wings, the rear underwing or diffuser as we call it, and the front wing end plates themselves. The proposal is that they be raised by 10mm. Now the effect of that is a lot less downforce on the front and a lot less downforce overall. Maybe a good thing, we don't know. It certainly will mean that braking distances, for example, will get longer. Now that for me is an improvement. We may well see the opportunity for those overtaking maneuvers, which with the improvements in downforce and the development in brake technology has become rather a rare sight.
Michael Schumacher as Martin Brundle and Gerhard Berger on lap 61. And then it is Andrea de Cesaris. Jean Alesi still in 5th position. John and Jean Alesi running a little slower than Andrea at the moment. Could he feel tired?
I would think that Jean Alesi is feeling both tender and tired. Well, there's a little close-up looking at the rev counter in the cockpit of Gerhard Berger's Ferrari. But yes, I think Alesi will suffer. I would be very surprised any driver who's come back from a severe injury to the neck would not be tired, and this of course physically and mentally, as we've said, extremely demanding.
Well, if we think of Andrea de Cesaris, who actually lives in Monte Carlo and raced for a number of Formula One teams, including McLaren, qualified on pole, and his best result comes from 1983 when he finished 2nd in South Africa and Germany. And if I remember right, John, that was in an Alfa Romeo engine car.
Indeed it was, and of course he had a pole position in 82 in Long Beach, and Andrea, when he left McLaren, he felt maybe that he wanted a team that, in his terms, almost babied him a bit more than McLaren was doing. And in Long Beach, stunningly quick. And that car did have speed, but not always the greatest reliability. And then for Andrea, it's been a long career with many highs, but a lot more lows.
Well, Michael Schumacher passing Pedro Lamy, and I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding which way they were going to go.
I would say there was a misunderstanding. Well, this is the end of Bertrand Gachot. No, it's not, it's Paul Belmondo, I think. A few laps ago. Indeed it is. The yellow flag out for Belmondo to stop before he rejoins the track.
Now we've got 3 drivers still on the same lap: Schumacher, Brundle and Berger. Then Andrea de Cesaris is a lap down on race leader Michael Schumacher. So is Jean Alesi, Michele Alboreto, and we see off our screen Paul Belmondo coming into the pits. And I think Belmondo, who's 8 laps behind, he'll probably call it a day. Oh, he might have to get his money's worth.
Well, the Pacific team looking around, I suspect there's maybe some overheating, the way they're looking into the radiator intakes. As Michael Schumacher really coming up to end lap 63, 15 remaining. And there's the gap between second and third places. 8 seconds. If this result stays as it is, it'll be 4 out of 4 for Michael Schumacher, and it's beginning to show signs of the domination that we saw 2 years ago from Nigel Mansell when he won 5 in a row. He hoped to do it here, make it 6. But a last-minute problem with one of the rear wheels meant a pit stop, and that became raceman 5 for Ayrton Senna.
But John, I think the most important thing for Schumacher is, of course, he's won 4 Grand Prix, but apart from that, there's different people finishing in second place and in the rest of the points all the time.
Well, that's good for Schumacher and bad for everybody else. That dissipation of points, of course, is leaving the path wide open for Schumacher to take maximum advantage. But let's wait and see. We've got Spain in 2 weeks' time, and with the technical changes, it really is totally unknown. No team owner, no driver knows precisely what the outcome is going to be, and it's quite possible that cars and teams that have been further back in the first 4 races may suddenly find themselves being very competitive. So, of course, there are going to be changes not just in Barcelona but in Canada, and then at the German Grand Prix, and the ones projected for Germany are very major ones indeed. But we did have Ron Dennis this morning in our extended half-hour show explain that whatever the regulation change, whatever regulations are going to be, his team will design and build chassis for the particular regulation.
Well, there's Pedro Lamy in the pits, and there was a little bit of confusion, I had a feeling. Someone took the nose off and then said, no, put it back on. So, don't know really what that was good for. But Lamy in the pits and out of the pits again. He's the last of the runners in 12th position. And there we see Schumacher and Brundle. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. There's Gerhard trying to find a way past the back markers. Well, and that's what you said before, John, I suppose. They bunch up a little bit and then you lose time very easy indeed.
Well, Michele Alboreto into the points in 6th place, and he was putting a lap on Olivier Panis, and of course Gerhard Berger also about to pounce on a former Ferrari star, Michele Alboreto. I just hope that Michele, who I think amongst his hobbies He is a gentleman after all. Will not really give Gerhardt too much of a difficult time. It would serve no object at all.
On the computer you could see it. On screen we haven't really seen it, but the gap between André de Cesaris in 4th and Jean Alesi in 5th is closing down. And not only that, John, a 1:23.420 for Alesi is a new fastest lap for him in this Monaco Grand Prix.
It's as if he's got a second wind, and he's cut into the lead André de Cesaris has. He's reduced it now by 3-4 seconds in the last couple of laps. And the message very clearly on the Jordan board.
Well, there's Christian Fittipaldi walking back across the bridge to the Footwork Motorhome, or Arrows Motorhome as it's called. Get changed and get ready for Spain. Now, John, is it feasible that the teams that maybe not that far advanced aerodynamically have a little bit of an advantage, at least in Barcelona, if they do have to get rid of rear diffusers, front wing end plates higher and things like that?
I would think on paper, yes, but in reality, I suspect, and I know of one team, but I suspect most teams who have a wind tunnel facility, once these proposals were issued on Friday afternoon, were straight into the wind tunnel. And a figure that I've been given is approximately 22 to 25% reduction in downforce overall. That's a lot. So while, as I say, I think it may initially bring a bit of a bunching between front and rear, once the decision about what the dimensions and precisely what is required has been made clear, Barcelona is going to be a lottery, there's no doubt about that. But beyond there, the teams at the front will always be the teams at the front. Those battling and fighting their way forward are just going to have to continue the progress presently in.
Jean Alesi on his way to the back of André de Cesaris. Remember, Alesi having made that extra pit stop to replace a nose cone, currently in 5th position, and Schumacher did a couple of 1 minute 25 second laps, and now speeded up again and back into the 22 seconds.
I think de Cesaris really, it was traffic that caused the loss of time, and again traffic just ahead of Andrea. He'll want to use it as Olivier Beretta, and he will want to get past as quickly as possible. And Andrea pushing all the way. Beretta ought to be able to pull over to the right onto Portier, let de Cesaris get through without any problem. Well, he's decided, I'm going to race de Cesaris regardless of his position. I'm a racing driver after all. And one has to say it is a sign of immaturity in a driver when he doesn't recognize cars coming up to lap, that where possible he can pull over and let that car get through as cleanly and quickly as possible.
And I definitely see blue flags being waved to Olivier Beretta at this moment. So Beretta, be a good boy and get out of the way.
Well, the difference in straight line performance between the Hart V10 and the Ford HB V8 probably more or less identical. So in a situation like this, it's very frustrating. The temptation is to try and take a flyer down the inside. It's a big risk. Alesi, quite wisely, just hanging back and watching what's going on. And if the opportunity arises, well, he'll be there to pounce on the pair of them.
Olivier Beretta, who's actually yet to finish a Grand Prix in this season. And I think we're also missing Pedro Lamy at the moment, John, by the way. Beretta, in his first year of Formula One, as teammate to Eric Gomez. Well, he didn't finish in either of the 3 previous races.
Allard, it's in situations like this, bearing in mind the focus on Formula One, that Olivier Beretta should be given a stop-go penalty, brought in. He's been ahead of De Cesaris now 3 laps. There have been flags around the circuit waved to him. Even his own team should signal or indicate some way to let De Cesaris go through. He's not achieving anything. Currently in 8th place, 2 laps down.
He's done that now.
Well, finally now he's got Alesi. So Alesi, I think, a little bit more aggressive. And of course, in the Ferrari, a lot more powerful.
Well, going through Casino Square, Alesi showing his nose, but that was a bit optimistic, I suppose, John.
Well, at least there's a clear blue flag, but that flag was only a stationary blue. It should be waved vigorously.
So Jean Alesi now being trapped behind Olivier Beretta, and there we saw a waved yellow flag for Beretta. Now maybe at the end of that short straight, the tunnel, the end of the tunnel, and yes, Alesi is through. But he did sort of muscle his way through a little bit, didn't he?
Well, I think it was once Beretta woke up to the fact that there was a battle going on with De Cesaris and Alesi, the penny did drop. But I don't think he's going to be flavour of the weekend or flavour of the day. And it's issues like that that the Drivers' Association should bring to their own attention. There's no use carping on about circuit safety or car safety if the drivers themselves don't discipline themselves.
Jean Alesi now 2.1 seconds behind Andrea De Cesaris, and Martin Brundle there on the tail of Olivier Beretta. Brundle still in 2nd position, but of course some 35 seconds behind.
Well, now Martin Brundle safely alongside and past. Brundle comfortably in 2nd place, and just to rub it in, Michael Schumacher drops a casual 1 minute 21.244. 34.3 seconds lead over Brundle in 2nd place, and Brundle a further 23 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger.
This position would equal Martin's best result, and that came in 1992 when he was racing for the Benetton team, and that was Monza. Italian Grand Prix 92 when he finished 2nd. Behind the top 3 we've mentioned is De Cesaris and Alesi, then it's Michele Alboreto still in 6th, 7th JJ Leto, 8th Olivier Beretta, 9th Johnny Herbert, 10th Oliver Panis, 11th Eric Gomez, and I don't think Pedro Lamy is actually going round anymore, Tom. He might do, I'm not sure.
Well, we're getting down to the normal level of runners at this stage. We're on lap 72, and in reality we've got 11 cars on the track.
Olivier Beretta, there's the man, and the camera on the front of his car. Well, it's still a lovely shot. But Beretta in 8th position, and it would be the first time he's going to finish a Grand Prix.
Well, this is the view from Beretta's car out of the chicane down to Tabac, and I wonder if you can get the experience that is, for me, the best on the Monaco circuit. Now, with a very quick left-right through the first part of the swimming pool complex, the slower exit, and then down into Rascasse. Here, of course, very easy indeed under braking in a curve to lose grip. We saw it happen on Thursday. Eric Comas and Paul Belmondo both nudged the rear of their cars into these unusual barriers they have. They've got a It's a plastic tank filled with water. There they are in front of the Armco barrier itself. And in some parts of the circuit, they do seem to be very effective.
Well, Johnny Herbert's in the pits with the Lotus, and that's a bit more than a normal stop. Well, we go past Casino Square down to Mirabeau, and well, you can see that's a very, very steep hill indeed.
Now into Poitiers and back onto the seafront. And from here, it's flat out all the way through the tunnel. Gerhard Berger was the quickest man through that at the weekend, just over 280 kilometers per hour.
5 laps to go for race leader Michael Schumacher. Still a long way ahead of second place man Martin Brundle. And for Martin this year, it would be the first time he finishes in the points, if I'm not mistaken. Retired in Ida and retired in Brazil, finished 8th in Imola and could pick up 6 points here in Monaco. Well, Johnny Herbert still in the pits, and his car, he's out of the car and out of the race. So a retirement for Johnny Herbert while we watch teammate Pedro Lamy.
Well, Spain is a Grand Prix where we're hoping that Lotus will have their 94 car in action. They certainly have had a difficult beginning to this year, and with the Mugen Honda V10 engine, much more difficult package to install in a car which in 93 wasn't the easiest of cars to drive, and Lotus looking for something to give them a better second part to the year.
And of course, when we look forward to Barcelona in 2 weeks, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you can watch it all live on Eurosport. Qualifying on Friday and Saturday, the warm-up Sunday morning, and of course the race on Sunday afternoon. We see 2 Benettons, JJ Leto 7th, and for JJ it'll be the first time he finishes Grand Prix, and well, if he wasn't fit enough, he'll be fit after this one, John.
Well, it's a Grand Prix under his belt, the first Grand Prix of the year, and he needs it badly, but I think what he needs most of all is to go away and get a little bit of running somewhere and just get his confidence, get his rhythm. It's been a difficult Monaco Grand Prix for JJ Leto. The car obviously is the class of the field right now, and in reality running in 7th place but 2 laps down on your teammate and race leader is not good enough.
Well, Schumacher letting JJ unlap himself at this moment. That's very nice.
Well, it's a little gesture. I think that it will give the race results a better look in terms of positions and laps behind race leader. And Michael Schumacher really has no need to maintain the pace that he is throughout the Grand Prix, and he can now take these remaining laps, let's say gently, lap 76 of 78. He wants to be cautious and letting JJ unlap himself. In reality, it's just a way of Michael saying, off you go, JJ.
So Michael Schumacher and JJ Leto lapping in the 1:25-second bracket, so there's no danger at all for race leader Michael Schumacher. There we see the gap, 36.8 seconds. That was the previous lap. This lap, Michael done a 25.9. And, well, whatever Gerald Martin does, he's not going to catch Michael Schumacher in the remaining miles.
A little bit further down, it looks like Jean Alesi has finally conceded fourth place to Andrea de Cesaris. The gap is over 10 seconds. And we have speculated that maybe Jean Alesi has felt the pace and the pounding of the Monaco Grand Prix circuit. We don't know whether he has a problem on the other hand. But for de Cesaris, it appears his last Grand Prix of the season, picking up, or en route, let's say, to pick up 3 points. But really more importantly for Jordan, those 3 points are sufficient to guarantee them third place in the Manufacturers' Championship behind Benetton and Ferrari. Well, it looks, in spite of Schumacher letting Leto forward and Jackie Ickx, we just quickly saw on the start-finish line. But really, Michael almost falling over himself not to run up too closely behind teammate Leto on this, the final of 78 laps.
Interesting, John. JJ Leto now posting his fastest lap of the race.
Well, maybe there's a bit of psychology somewhere in the Benetton team that's just chasing JJ along a little bit.
So Michael Schumacher, Martin Brundle, Gerhard Berger, Andrea de Cesaris, Jean Alesi and Michele Alboreto. That's the top 5 with race leader and, well, championship leader Michael Schumacher on his very last lap. Now, JJ, of course, still got to do a lap, and that means, John, that the Cesaris, Alesi and Alboreto, they're all on the same lap as JJ. So if any of those 4 stop, or 3 stop, then JJ could easily pick up a point.
Well, stranger things have happened in Monte Carlo, but I think the likelihood of that happening is a little remote, as Jackie Ickx gives victory flag once again to Michael Schumacher, and really the race was given to him in this corner on the first lap when Damon Hill nudged Mika Häkkinen out of the Grand Prix, but that takes nothing away whatsoever from a superb Benetton Ford Schumacher package performance. An outstanding performance equally from Marlboro McLaren Peugeot. Martin Brundle starting in 10th, finishing in 2nd, 6 points in the bin, and a lot more in prospect.
And there's Andrea de Cesaris crossing the line in 4th position. The whole team very happy indeed. So Andrea, well done, I should say. And, well, ecstatic Benetton team there. So Michael Schumacher wins the Grand Prix here in Monaco. Martin Brundle 2nd, Gerhard Berger in 3rd place. 4th, Andrea de Cesaris, 1 lap down. 5th, Jean Alesi. In 6th position, Michele Alboreto scoring his first point of the season. So for Brundle, de Cesaris, Alesi, de Cesaris and Alboreto, the first points of the 1994 season. Oh, and also for Alesi, of course.
Well, Berger literally just stopping after the finish line. Classified 3rd, visor up, steering wheel off and out of the car. Significant performance for McLaren, of course. Peugeot's first World Championship points. And they have come into Grand Prix racing, discovered the pressures associated with it. They've now got their first points. And I think they'll be looking forward to Spain, Canada, but primarily Monaco in France for the French Grand Prix, because that's where I believe we're going to see a further development from Peugeot with their a V10, the A6 designated engine that we currently have. Maybe something called an A8 will be available at Monaco.
There's Gerhard Berger walking back from his Ferrari. And former teammates and friends, John, Brundle and Schumacher.
Well, two delighted men. Schumacher really now coming to a Grand Prix and expecting to take 10 points. Jean Alesi equally, I think, will be pleased. Got 2 points, not too many. Well, it goes along with the 4 he picked up in Brazil for that 3rd place. But Michael Schumacher really has been the class of the year. And right now, well, I don't know who's going to touch him. Ron Dennis, I think, very pleased indeed with the performance of Martin Brundle. I think he did all that was expected of him. Only disappointment, of course, was that Mika Häkkinen wasn't there to push Schumacher harder.
JJ there, getting back into the pits. Beretta, we see in front of our commentary booth, being very happy with 8th position. And
well, once again we've seen it, the bear hug from team boss Flavio Briatore and his little protege Michael Schumacher. And well, it's a joy to watch their behaviour. A little bit more subdued. Martin Brundle having a chat to 3rd place man Gerhard Berger, and smiles from both men.
Well, the Constructor Championship is coming onto your screen. Of course, Schumacher has got 40 points now. And 2nd in that championship is Gerhard Berger on 10. Benetton, Ford, Ferrari and Jordan is the top 3 in the Constructors World Championship. But John, 30 points between Gerhard Berger and Michael Schumacher. I wonder, is anybody going to stop that brilliant young German?
Well, they've got a lockout on the championship in terms of Schumacher. They've got to get JJ into the points or start scoring. But the only fly in the ointment will come with the major regulation changes that are in hand. But I believe that Benetton have got such a good car, regardless of whatever the changes turn out to be, and that we're not going to know until at least tomorrow, and probably even a little bit later. But it is hope and opportunity for other teams.
Applause for the top 3 here in Monaco. Michael Schumacher in the middle in blue, Martin Brundle on the left and Gerhard Berger on the right.